Hey everybody, Drilling in the Name of here. And today, I didn't feel like setting up my camera. However, it's not all laziness over here because today we're getting back in the lab to settle some unfinished business. A few weeks ago, Oh god. Time flies when you're not making content. Anyway, a long time ago, MusNothus and I teamed up with resident DRG weapons expert MeatShield and his friend Lunari to see how far we could break the elemental buffs of the Conductive Thermals Overclock for the Drac. If you happen to catch that video, you'd know that we were able to do well over 9,000 damage and likely set a DRG record for total damage inflicted by a single attack. But despite how outrageous that number is, it just wasn't enough for you bloodthirsty lunatics. We received a lot of comments with suggestions on how to inflict even more damage, so let's address a few. For starters, a lot of people suggested using the PGL with hyperpropellant and incendiary compound. Let's check it out. First, MeatShield hits the bulk's weak point with no conductive thermal stacks. Then he hits the weak point with around 600 stacks. As you can see, there was little to no difference between a solo shot and a shot with conductive thermals added. This is because the hot side of damage in DRG is split into two categories, heat and fire. Don't ask me why, because I don't know. Anyway, hyperpropellant with incendiary compound only does heat damage, which unfortunately does not interact with the elemental buff of conductive thermals. Next, we got a bunch of comments suggesting the Colette Wave Cooker with blistering necrosis to add an additional weak point to the equation. Gross. To test this, MeatShield is going to fire a volatile bullets shot at an ignited elite bulk's weak point, which does a total of 1,551 damage. Side note, no matter what we're filming, this is MusNothus pretty much any time he's not actively needed for what's going on. Anyway, next, MeatShield is going to fire a volatile bullets shot at the blister. Unfortunately, damage text didn't show the number for some reason, but MeatShield did some snazzy console commands to check the damage, which ended up being around 671. And if that explanation sounds a little too convenient, you can also see in my clip that it takes very little damage. This is because although the bulk itself is ignited, the blister is not, so it's not able to take advantage of the volatile bullets multiplier. Lastly, probably the most obvious suggestion was critical weakness. Now in fairness, MeatShield had thought of this, but wanted our initial testing to be more vanilla, with just weapon mods contributing to the damage total. Hopefully you saw the first video, because rather than repeat all the reasoning behind the methodology, I'm just gonna dive right in. For our first test, all three scouts applied conductive thermal stacks, and on MeatShield's command, I threw an IFG grenade. MeatShield's volatile bullets shot resulted in a whopping 74,088 damage, more than doubling our highest number from the previous video. However, that was fired with only about 1,600 stacks of CT, and we knew we could get over 2,000. Let's see what kind of damage that can do. 91,800 damage. At this point, it became all about breaking this mechanic even further, so we went back to the drawing board trying to figure out how to incorporate Tier 4B. Plasma Splash adds area damage, 50% of which is fire, which effectively doubles your stacks. The only issue is that it starts popping the bulk's weak points before you can apply any meaningful number of stacks. We tried using an Elite Mactera grabber in the damage reduction crystals, but CT with Tier 4B still chewed right through it. Plus, Lunari correctly predicted that even if we used that to keep an elite bulk alive longer to theoretically apply more stacks, the damage reduction would cut our final damage number anyway. My only other thought was to spawn a gigantic elite bulk in the hopes that the weak points would be too far away to get hit by Plasma Splash, but it seems like it just targets the closest weak point regardless of its location. So unfortunately, Tier 4B was out. The only other theory was that each of us pausing drag fire to shoot firebolts, throw an IFG, and hit the bulk with Mark for Death was allowing too many stacks to decay. For this test, MusNothus and I applied continuous stacks and let Lunari handle the firebolt, IFG, and Mark for Death shot. This only got us to 85,709 damage, with the conclusion being that the stacks you retain from not pausing and allowing stacks to decay do not make up for the stacks you lose by only having two scouts firing. Which brings us to the finale. After all our brainstorming and testing, it seems like our final method from the first video is still the best way to maximize our damage total. So we headed back to the sandbox test room one last time. I applied Conductive Thermal stacks with Lunari and MusNothus. On MeatShield's Q, I threw an IFG, MusNothus shot a firebolt, and Lunari fired a marked for death shot. And finally, one last volatile bullet from MeatShield. 146,308. It's hard to even comprehend that number within the context of DRG, so MusNothus gave some interesting perspective. He completed a solo elite deep dive with no Bosco and this person's stat tracker mod. Across the entire dive, he did 234,992 damage and had 1,395 kills. So we did more than half the damage of an entire elite deep dive with that one volatile bullets shot. To put it another way, 146,308 damage is equal to the health of 1,625 grunts, which would be more kills than Mus's entire deep dive had all the enemies been grunts. Well, I think that pretty much puts Conductive Thermals to rest, and I hope you enjoyed the journey. Oily oaf, please, Lloyd. Big thank you to MeatShield for bringing this to our attention and setting all this up, Lunari for helping test and offering some great suggestions we hadn't thought of, and of course MusNothus for always helping with the filming. Let us know in the comments what you'd like to see us tackle next. Like and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and as always, rock and stone, brothers and sisters.